No doubt you spend a ton of time online searching for all sorts of information. And if you're anything like me, Google is probably your first and main place that you go whenever you're trying to find any information on the web. But you're about to start on a research project that's going to require you to find primary sources. And using your usual search methods will mean that you spend a lot of time just trying to track down sources. Here's an example. I was doing some searching on Google for primary sources related to labor, and I certainly found some interesting looking links. Let's take a look at a couple of things that came up. The first thing looks like a library guide to primary sources in labor. That's probably going to be pretty useful. Here's a lesson plan about Barbie in the labor force. Probably aimed at younger students than yourself. Probably not necessarily going to be all that useful. This looks interesting. It's a site from the Library of Congress, but looking again, it looks like this is a teacher's lesson. There's probably some primary sources in here, but a lot of it is going to be aimed at teachers. Here's a book that's got some primary sources that I could buy for $11.83 if I felt like throwing money at the problem. Here's good old Wikipedia, some article about the Knights of Labor. Wikipedia isn't going to give me any primary sources. Oh good, and here is some kind of crappy advertising. We've pulled random links, please click on our crappy advertisement site. So as you can see here, Googling for primary sources is going to be really hit and miss. You're going to have to go through a lot of links, many of which might not be exactly what you're looking for. And also, you're probably like me and tune out the number of search results that you find when you search on Google. But stop and look. We found 26 million search results. I don't know about you, but I've got better things to do with my time than go through page after page of links trying to track down something that might be useful. So let me introduce you to your new best friend, the Primary Sources Research Guide from the SF State Library. This is a website that I, your history librarian, have put together and am constantly updating that is a one-stop shop for useful quality primary sources. It essentially pulls together all those random things that you might be able to find online, but gets rid of the unuseful stuff. And it also pulls in sources you can get through our library. We pay for a number of online databases full of primary sources that you have access to if you link to them through our library, and this page will do that. And it also can help you track down printed sources that have primary sources in them. Hopefully you've already had a chance to use the online research guides, which are exactly what they sound like, a guide to doing research. These are linked on the SFSU library website. And you'll see that they're organized by subject. If you scroll through the list and pull up history, you'll see that there are a couple of different guides that can help you with your research, and the primary sources guide, your new best friend, is linked first thing right under most useful. So what does the guide go over? Well, it has a little bit of introduction, and importantly, notice on the right it has my contact info, Kendra, the history librarian. So if you would like to ask for any help, I would be more than happy to help out, and this is a good place to track me down. But then what it does is it organizes into tabs different types and methods for finding primary sources, and I'd like to talk about a couple of those. The sources we're going to talk about right now are the ones that you can get online, but I want to point out that there's also information about printed sources for primary sources. So there is a tab that talks about finding primary sources that have been reprinted in books. There is a tab that talks about getting government sources specifically. And there is a tab that will go over what different archival collections exist here at SFSU or in the Bay Area that you could easily get to and use to do your research. There's also a tab for History 300, which will link all of the different handouts and PowerPoints, that sort of thing, all the things we've used in class, as well as all of the videos that you have to watch for homework. But now let's focus in on the primary sources that we can get online. And the first thing I want to talk about are historical newspapers and magazines. These are sources that tend to work for most research topics from about the 18th century onwards. Obviously, if you're doing Renaissance, medieval, ancient history, newspapers and magazines probably didn't exist. But for anyone doing research in the 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, newspapers and magazines are easily available online and probably will have a lot of information for you. Let's talk about the historical newspapers and magazines that are available online. So how the guide works is it offers a whole bunch of suggestions. Here are the most useful sites that contain primary sources. Again, historical newspapers and magazines specifically. Sites that would work for probably a lot of people's topics. And then down under also useful are some more specialized sites, things that might not necessarily work for everybody, but could work really well for you. And then at the very bottom of the page, there is information about how to find out what else is online. So if you look over the list and don't find exactly what you need, want to know what else is out there, these are links that I use all the time to track down historical newspapers and magazines. Let's talk about the different sources that are available on this page. Some of the links are very straightforward. For example, you'll see we have access to the New York Times from 1851 to 2007. Also, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Los Angeles Times. Pretty obvious what those are. But some of these links have really boring, bad titles, like America's Historical Newspapers or American Periodical Series. The links that have really vague, boring titles are actually really important. These are databases or websites that have hundreds, if not thousands, of different individual magazines or newspapers. So the people who put it together had to give it a really generic name to encompass all of those different sources. What I've tried to do is give you a blurb for each link, giving you a bit of information about what's in that particular site or database. And so, for example, you can see American Periodical Series covers 1740 to 1900, and it's articles from numerous magazines throughout the United States. This is a key source if you want to find magazine sources from this period. And your first inclination is probably going to be to skip it because of the really bad name. But again, if you stop and read the blurb, it should hopefully help you figure out why you might actually really want to take a look at that site. You'll notice that many of the links focus on American history, and that's just because American sources are more commonly available online. But you will see some international sources. For example, we have access to the Times of London all the way back to 1785. And then if you start scrolling down under also useful, where you'll see some more specialized sources, there'll be more international sources mixed in there. For example, the Caribbean Newspaper Digital Archive or the British Library online collection. Each one of these links will take you into an individual website or database where you can get into the original newspaper or magazine online, and we'll talk more in class about the best way to search through these newspaper and magazine collections. So the other thing I want to talk about quickly in this video is the tab for online primary sources. This is where I put links to all of the other primary sources that you can get online that are not newspapers and magazines. Again, the guide is separated into most useful, websites that will probably work for many of your topics, and then also useful, sites that have more specialized collections that may not necessarily work for everyone, but might work for you. And then finally, at the bottom of the page, there's information that will help you track down other sources online. So if you go through all of the resources listed on this page and don't find anything that works for you, or are wondering what else is out there on the web, these are the websites that I use all of the time to help students track down primary sources on their topics. Just like when you're looking at the newspaper and magazine links, some of the links look very straightforward, like Working Women, 1800 to 1930. Pretty obvious what time period it covers, it's about women, it's about labor. But there are other links on this page that look incredibly boring, like American Memory. Totally vague, boring sounding link. Again, stop and read the blurb. I've tried to put in a little description about what is in each of these collections. And if you do, you'll notice that American Memory is a huge collection of sources on American history that comes from the U.S. Library of Congress. The collections cover a number of different sort of general topic areas. It includes presidential papers of a number of important presidents, So this is a really important website to check out for many of your topics. So that's all the overview I want to do at this point, except again to point out that there are other tabs that go over finding primary sources in different ways or finding specific types of primary sources. For now, just look over the different links that are listed on the Online Primary Sources tab and on the online section of the Historical Newspapers and Magazines tab. We'll talk specifically about different ways to search these different websites and databases in class. For now, I just want you to browse around and notice which of the different links look like they could be useful for your topic.